Good Erev Shabbos. This is Rabbi Tzvi Mandel of Congregation Kalbnei Yisrael, the Barzels, this community of Jewish friends. And I'd like to go through a few points. First, I would like to mention what we mentioned in the last YouTube. There are basically two ways of looking at the place that Masechta Avos, the tractate of our ancestors, takes up in the Shas, in the 60 tractates of the Talmud. Rambam, in the 8 chapters, Shmona Prakim La Rambam, which is an introduction to Masechta Avos, tractate, chapters of our ancestors. The correct way how to learn Pirkei Avos is to first learn the 8 chapters of Pirkei Avos, which many Chassidim do. And there we had mentioned, the Rambam seems to hold, doesn't seem to hold, he says it openly, that it's the tractate that comes after tractate Sanhedrin, the tractate that speaks about Jewish courts. And as we explained, he says there how important it is for the Jewish courts to be in order and honest and truthful. And this is a very important point that the first chapter speaks about in Pirkei Avos, in our ancestors' chapters. Obviously, basically, Jewish courts being in order the way they should be, not paskening like the Shulchan Aruch, not deciding on Jewish law according to what it says in the books, but rather, as Maimonides says over there, to try to do pshara, to do the best that everybody feels comfortable and happy to walk into Jewish courts, and to feel that they're being treated equally like a decent human being, and a Jew should be treated. That would be the right way of Yiddishkeit, and how it should be. Sadly enough, in today's world, we have very few Jewish courts that are run the way they should be. And it's not myself that said that, but great people in our generation, and definitely the last 50 years have said that. One of the greatest leaders said that if a Jew walks out of a Jewish court, a woman in a case of a divorce, and next week still keeps Shabbos and lights the candles, then she's on a very high level. She's a great person, because we have to look with a magnifying glass, so to say, for a good Jewish court in today's world. So we don't want to dwell on the negative. And the other view is the view of the Meiri. The Meiri is also one of the early commentaries on the level of Rashi and the Rambam and Tosfos and Ramban and the Ravid. The Halakha Meiri says that tractate Pirkei Avos, chapters of our ancestors, is actually the first tractate in the whole 60 tractates of Shas of the Talmud. And he dwells on the fact that this, what we learn between Pesach and Shavuos, Passover and Shavuos, is the foundation and the main point of Judaism, of Yiddishkeit, and to be fit to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, we must take into ourselves the lessons that are learned in these 6 or 5 chapters. We added to that the Arizal says, Reb Chaim Vital quotes his Rebbe, the Arizal, that says the reason why the Torah doesn't openly speak about good character is because what kind of a connection do you have with studying Torah if you're not a simply decent human being and a person who tries to be what the Torah wants us to be, what Hashem wants us to be. You have no connection with learning Torah, with studying Torah. On the contrary, God doesn't want the Torah of those who have horrible character and don't try to include themselves, their minds, their hearts, their bodies, into the lessons of the 5 or 6 chapters of our ancestors. Lubavitcher Rebbe takes it a step further, and he says, as his great genius mind, his great genius neshama Shabbat and his great heart understood very well that throughout the whole Shas, throughout the whole 60 tractates, whether you're studying the laws of Shabbos, or whether you're studying the laws of damages, whether you're studying the laws of Yom Kippur, or whatever it might be, all the 60 tractates, all the Tanaim, all the holy leaders that we find over there, whatever their view is, stems from how they see Pirkei Avos, how a Jew and a human being should act. It could be tracked backwards to what the view of that great leaders has in Pirkei Avos, in tractate of our chapters of our ancestors. We want to introduce the chapters of our fathers in another level as well. The Halakha of Yisrael, the Kashan Samagid, the Gon V'Kadish, the Kashan Samagid, who was so great and so great and so great. One of the greatest students of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, of the Magid, the Mezritcher Magid, takes this a step further. The word Yisrael, a Jew, is spelled in Hebrew Yud Shin Reish Lamed Aleph. Reish Lamed Aleph is 231. There are 231 gates to Torah, as it says in Kabbalah. V'yesh Gematria Omer. The word Yesh, Yud Shin, 310, equals Ayin Mem Reish. 310. Therefore, the reward and the world to come, the Olam Haba, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chelik Olam Haba, it says in the beginning of the tractate of Pirkei Avos. Every Jew has a part in the world to come. Means that every Jew, according to his Aimer, according to his measurement, according to his worship of Hashem, and according to his part of the 231 gates in the Torah, and every single Yid is connected to every single one of these things. There's no one that's left out. So that's how great your part in the world to come will be. In other words, like this. Though there are great tzaddikim, and there are middle people, beinanim, and there are simple people, it has nothing to do with what you see with your eyes. Every single Jew has a connection to every single part of the Torah. One on a minute level, one on a middle level, one on a higher level. And therefore, he has every part of this as a reward in the world to come. Olam Haba. And the reason why Olam Haba is called the world to come, paradise is called the world to come, is because it's the world that you know comes to you after 120 years being in this world. Because you know what you feel connected with, what you feel comfortable with, what you love to do. Someone knows what he likes. Someone likes ice cream. Another person likes vegetables, asparagus, spinach, maybe. So this is how your next world will look. As the Zohar says, whatever attracts the person in this world. And what attracts you, not what your natural eye or mind or heart is attracted to the first second you see it. That's being an immature baby. But rather what you're connected to because of the hard work and that gave you a development of joy and love in this world because you accomplished it with your own hard work, with your heart, with your mind, with your actions. The 231 gates that you're connected to, and maybe you don't even know it. That's how your Gan Eden will look. We will divert a little bit to the great Yahrzeit that's coming this Shabbos, the 6th of Iyar, of the great Stolner Rebbe that's buried in Detroit, and Stolner Chassidim for the last 70 some odd years, 80 years, go to Detroit for this Shabbos. There was this great holy person who was very humble and never showed off his learning, though he knew the whole Torah backwards and forwards, studied all night, but by day he was busy helping others, helping other Jews. And his sensitivity to every single Yid. Give over a couple of stories. I heard from Mr. Tillemol Vashon that those years back in America in the 30s and the 40s, I guess, in Williamsburg, the only yeshiva that there was Yeshiva Torah Das, and he walked up Wilson Street once and saw a child out of his classroom, and he asked him, why aren't you learning? Why aren't you studying in yeshiva? And he said, because there was a rule then that you can't come to yeshiva without a white shirt and a tie. And since I'm an orphan, sadly enough, he doesn't have a father, and his mother's very poor, she can't afford a tie. So the Rebbe took off his hat and took off his tie and put it on him and said, go learn. The other story was a similar one to that. Again, someone met a man that said that when he was a child in Williamsburg is in Brooklyn, New York, USA, in those years, so the Rebbe was walking down the block, I guess, and he saw a child, everybody playing, and there was a child sitting on the side, all by himself. He asked him, why don't you go play with the other children? And he said, because everybody has a bike, or the riding on bikes, and I don't have one. My parents can't afford it. So he said, come with me to Lee Avenue, which is around the corner from Wilson Street. I remember when I was a child. And on Lee Avenue, there was Jaime's Bicycles. Jaime was a Jewish person who owned a bicycle store that not only sold bikes, but also rented them out. I don't know if they still have those things today. So he gave Jaime 25 cents, which was the price, and he rented a bike for a week, and he told the boy, next Friday, come to me, I'll give you another quarter. And from what I remember, this person said that it was years through his grade school, through elementary school, I believe he said that every Friday he would go to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would give him a quarter, and he'd rent a bicycle. Very special. Sadly enough, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin didn't have any children. The Stolner Rebbe had Chassidim throughout the United States of America. His father had yet, back in the 1860s, 1880s, Chassidim started coming already to different parts of the United States of America. And that's why he would travel from between Pesach, between Passover and Shavuos, these 7 weeks throughout the United States to be with his Chassidim for a Shabbos or for a couple of days. And he had Chassidim also in Bangor, Maine. And so he came to Bangor, Maine once by train, and it took about 14 hours, I believe, from Brooklyn, New York. And when he came to the train station, the president of the shul and his chassidim were waiting for him. And the president says to the Rebbe, Shalom Aleichem, Rebbe, I came here because I couldn't sleep. Your father from the other world, from the coming world, came to me in a dream and said, how could you lie in bed when one of my children is coming to visit you? So I got dressed, jumped up, and I came to meet you at the train station. Welcome, welcome. And the Rebbe said, yes. My Zaydis, my father, my ancestors go with me wherever I go. Wow. This is Kesa. Kesa Shabbat. On the other hand, he was Malchus Shabbat Malchus. He's really in this world helping and doing everything he can for other people. He had he lived in the shul in Williamsburg on Rodney Street, where next door there was a house, and he had one floor only for guests, one floor of beds, and another floor, I believe, was a kitchen and a dining room where guests were served 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Whenever you come, you could have a hot meal, and no one knew where in the world this man got the money to do this, and how could he afford it? And these days, they would go collect who knows how many millions, or like the president today says, billions or trillions, right? But somehow these holy people were able to do it. And there are many stories about his chesed, his love for others, but I like the small stories about how sensitive he was and how he understood others. And there was a simple Jew that would come to him every day, maybe mincha time, and just talk to him, and he would answer, and maybe he would laugh. So the Rebbe would laugh, cry, the Rebbe would cry. It was like a back and forth. And one day he comes with his head down, and the Rebbe says, Itzikel, why is your head down? And he says, Rebbe, I got to tell you, the Dodgers lost today. You don't say such things to Chassidish Rebbe. But he did. He was a simple guy. He didn't mean anything bad. And the Rebbe said, oh, Abrach, it's such a sad thing, Abrach. The Dodgers haben verloren, the Dodgers lost. And he repeated it, oh, Abrach, the Dodgers haben verloren. So on one hand, he was high up in the heavens. On the other hand, he was right here, helping and doing the best he can for others. And one of the last things he did in this world was reported was he was in Detroit. That's why he's buried in Detroit. In fact, they didn't know where to bury him, whether to take him back to New York or not. The Chassidim in Detroit wanted him to bury there. The Chassidim in New York wanted him there. And one of the reasons, from what I was told, and then later I saw maybe the Capuchin Rebbe said it, one of the reasons why they buried him in Detroit was because when they opened up his luggage that he took along, they found tachrichin in it, shrouds that one is buried with. So obviously he knew that where he was going, he was being buried. Others said maybe he always took it along with him. Whatever the story is. You and I are not going to know because we weren't there. But definitely he was always carrying around his tachrichin. And the day that he passed away, there was an administrator of a yeshiva that he knew in Detroit, and he met him, or the person came to visit him when he was seeing people, and the Rebbe asked him, how's the yeshiva going? Meaning, what can I help him? And the man said, financially, we're not doing so great. The learning is great, and the Yerushalayim is great, and the mitzvahs and the davening is great, but the money is a little on the downside. And the Rebbe said, either he went with the man to a certain place. Oh, the catch was like this, because there were certain books that the yeshiva had to have in order to get certain monies from the government. And the yeshiva just didn't have the money for those books. And the Rebbe went with this person, and they got a hold of these books that were needed for the legalities, and they took him in a taxi, and the Rebbe went with him to the shul, perhaps upstairs in the ladies section, and he started looking at each book. For a second, said, this one's not good, this one is good, this one doesn't fit for a yeshiva, this one is okay. And in a short time, he had the books that he needed. Rebbe was not involved with the yeshiva. Nothing. It wasn't a money thing. It wasn't a covet thing. He wasn't honored by the yeshiva by a dinner for it or anything like that. But this allowed the yeshiva to get the monies that they needed. After that, he saw some other people. I think there was a woman that was in by him the last time. She was the last person to see him, from what I remember being told. And after some time, he either looked at his watch and said, okay, it's time to go, or he said, it's time to go daven. And she went out of the room and he passed away. Some of the great things that was said about him was, in fact, the Kapitchitz Rebbe Zechavacha, the Heilige Kapitchitz Rebbe Avram Yeshua Heschel, and the Stolner Rebbe, the Detroit Rebbe, were partners in a business. What kind of business? So the Kapitchitz Rebbe later on would say, we were partners in a spiritual business. None of them were rich. Both of them were not rich. Both of them lived like paupers. Kapitchitz on Lower East Side, and the Rebbe who was buried in Detroit lived basically in Williamsburg, which is across the Williamsburg Bridge. The business was giving out charities to people, astronomical amounts of money in the years of the Depression so that they could live. And the Kapitchitz Rebbe would say that it came out, according to their businesses, that the Stolner Rebbe owed me a lot of money. $20,000 in those years? $20,000 in those years would be today like $100,000 without even a question. Probably more. And one day, I get a check in the mail, special mail, the special delivery, with the whole amount paid up. Now, the Holy Kapitchitz Rebbe was so humble, so he used to say, I thought to myself, oh, maybe I have to do tshuva, I have to repent. Maybe I'm not, the Rebbe doesn't want to have any connection with me anymore, so he pays me everything up, so I shouldn't have to look at me anymore. Not long after, he got the phone call that the Rebbe passed away. He was so amazed at the story that him and his cousin, the Biana Rebbe, who also lived on Lower East Side, a couple of blocks away from him on East Broadway, they both went to Detroit for the funeral. He was also a far cousin of theirs. We can't end with something bad, so we'll end with something joyous. Him and the Rebbitzin were very close. They would do all these things for others. And someone once came to him, just not a chassid, someone he never saw before, perhaps, a Yid in Williamsburg, and said, Rebbe, I'm getting married, and it's right after the war. Nebuch, who knows, this person probably saw his wife and children and parents slaughtered by Hitler. He said, Rebbe, I'm getting married, and I don't have a place to get married. I don't have a hall or anything. Can I get married in your shul? The Rebbe says, how are you going to get married? So he says, I have like a few dollars. He says, Rebbe, no. Come back. You'll have a normal, decent wedding like everybody else. In those years, it was decent. It was normal. Nothing astronomical, nothing crazily expensive and wild and who knows what. But rather, the Rebbe got his gabbai to get a number of chickens, shechted chickens, and they put white tablecloths on in the shul, on the tables, and they had maybe one or two musicians, and they had a most beautiful, respectable wedding, and lived happily ever after. Have a great joyous Shabbos. Rabbi Tzvi Mandel, congregation, Kal Bnei Yisrael, community of Jewish friends, Bar Zelos,